federal gun charges. It marks the first time a sitting president's son has been indicted on federal gun charges. Hunter has pleaded not guilty to the charges, but was originally planning to plead guilty as part of a deal that would have dismissed gun charges, but that deal fell through in court back in July. Let's go to Ryan Nobles now on Capitol Hill, who can tell us more about what has transpired. Ryan?
Lester, that's correct. Hunter Biden now facing 3 criminal counts related to that gun charge, and this came after the deal that was initially struck with federal prosecutors and Biden's legal team fell apart during a plea hearing in July. And part of the reason that this plea arrangement fell apart were these gun charges. Hunter Biden was scheduled to take part in a pretrial diversion program that would have allowed him to avoid these charges. But the judge in the case was very concerned about the parameters connected to that diversion program, specifically that she would be responsible for monitoring Biden's activity. That began her asking very serious questions about the plea arrangement in general. The two sides could not come to an agreement, and the judge did not accept those plea arrangements. That led to the special counsel in this case, David Weiss, who was originally the U.S. attorney, being given special counsel status by the Attorney General Merrick Garland, giving him the complete purview to continue the investigation into Hunter Biden and then hand down charges if he thought it was necessary. He signaled a week or two ago that there would be charges coming down and that they would come by the end of the month, and he has made good on that promise by filing these charges today through a grand jury. These 3 charges are connected to that gun charge. 2 of the counts are specifically related to the accusation that Hunter Biden lied on an application for a gun permit. And specifically, what the law states is that you cannot be an active drug user while applying for a gun permit or the use of a gun. And so the first 2 counts are related to that. And then the 3rd count has to do with the fact that he made a false claim that he was not using drugs during that period of time. Now, the original charge had with it a significant amount of jail time if convicted, perhaps up to 10 years. We're still working out the details as to whether or not those penalties would apply to this specific indictment as well if it is successfully prosecuted by the special counsel's office. But of course, Lester, it comes against the backdrop of enormous political pressure that has been put on the special counsel, in this case, David Weiss, and of course, the political pressure that is now on the White House as it relates to this. Earlier this week, the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy announcing a formal impeachment inquiry into the President of the United States, specifically related to his son's activities, questions around whether or not there was influence peddling from the vice president's office through Hunter Biden and his business dealings while he was serving as vice president. To be clear, House Republicans who've been investigating this case now for some time have yet to deliver any hard evidence that connects the president at all to his son's business dealings. But this complicates the political posture for the president heading into a re-election bid that his son, now, as you rightly point out, the first sitting president to face criminal charges in a situation like this. Lester?
Ryan Nobles, thanks. We'll ask you to stand by. I'm joined here by NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett and NBC legal analyst Danny Savelis. Laura, tell us how we got here. This was the same prosecution that had been willing to make this plea deal and now coming forward with charges.
Yeah, and I think it might be confusing for folks at home, especially as it relates to this gun charge that we're seeing today. This is not about failing to file taxes on time. This is certainly not related to anything having to do with Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings. This is solely related to lying on the form as he submitted it to the U.S. government in order to get a firearm back in 2018. And so, Lester, you might be wondering also why now in particular. It's because of the statute of limitations, which prescribes a certain amount of time for which you need to bring criminal charges against somebody. And in 2018 is when he allegedly made this purchase and actually signed the form falsely, according to the government. And it's because it happened in 2018, they actually had to bring the charges by this October or the statute of limitations would run out. So that's partly, I think, why we're seeing this right now, even though it has to do with something that happened way back in 2018. As also we know that the special counsel can file charges anywhere. So these happen to be in Delaware because that's where he purchased the gun. But the special counsel could still file other charges. He could still file things related to taxes or other issues, as we know the special counsel has been looking into. So we could see charges in places like California, the District of Columbia, and the special counsel, David Weiss, has already indicated that that's a possibility.
And Danny Savelis, let me ask you this. The case, as we said, is in Delaware. David Weiss was made special counsel counsel only recently, and there was some talk leading up to it that maybe he wasn't able to pull the trigger in a way he wanted, and that's why he became special counsel. How does that play into any of this?
Well, what's interesting is when that happened, there was speculation that the reason that the special counsel status was placed on him is so that he could investigate in other districts where he could have venue and have the powers of the special counsel. For example, federal districts in, say, California, where there may be tax charges. But what this represents is that the government is still going after the firearms charges that already existed to some degree in Delaware, in that jurisdiction. What this tells us is that, without question, the idea of Hunter Biden pleading guilty to entering into a diversionary program, that is something that is forever gone. He is now indicted. That decision has been made. And now this is also a statute, a federal statute that is charged very often, but under a different subsection. And that's why there's a debate about whether or not Hunter Biden got favorable or unfavorable treatment. On the one hand, yes, the federal government charges under this statute all the time, but there are many subsections. For example, if you're a felon, you're a prohibited person, you can't own a firearm. It's very easy to prove if you're a felon. If, on the other hand, you are addicted to some kind of stimulant or narcotic, that's a lot harder to prove. Does that mean just mere possession, one-time use? What exactly does that mean? So that's a subsection not as often charged. So it could be said that Hunter Biden was charged with something that's rarely brought, therefore his treatment was harsh. But on the other hand, when he was offered pretrial diversion, which is no longer on the table, that is something that is very rarely, particularly in the District of Delaware, ever offered at all.
All right, Danny, thanks. Let me turn to NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander. Any reaction from the White House thus far?
No reaction from the White House at this point, Lester, though we have heard from the president and the White House on this topic many times in the past. I think in the simplest of terms, this is a political headache for President Biden, but is also a personal heartache for him. Someone who is so close to his son. It's his loyalty to his son that some of his closest allies fear has caused political distractions. This certainly is not just that, but the potential to be a real impact as they head into the presidential season of 2024. This does set up the prospect of a criminal trial for the president of the United States' son, just as he is trying to make his case to Americans that he deserves another 4 years. The White House has said repeatedly that it has no involvement in this case. The president has repeatedly said that it is up to the Justice Department, that he has not engaged with them directly in any form as it relates to this case as well. And they also note, of course, that President Biden left David Weiss, that Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Delaware, to lead this investigation. But you can't underscore how difficult this is going to be for the Biden family. President Biden, with one surviving son after his son Beau Biden died in 2015 of brain cancer, has been so worried about his son Hunter because of his addiction with alcohol and drugs in the past, something that he has not fully recovered from right now. It still remains a real concern. I think for the President of the United States, this has the potential to have a toll on him. There had been a sense of hopefulness that this case would have been resolved with that plea deal, Lester, that we had been so focused on in the past couple months. Of course, when that dissolved, obviously it did take a toll, we are told, on the president and those around him, with the understanding that this had the potential to go to where it has now gone today, an indictment from the U.S. attorney, Lester.
All right, Peter, thank you. Hallie Jackson is NBC News' a senior Washington correspondent. Let's discuss the politics of this. Hunter is a private citizen. This will be a political flashpoint. Would you expect the president will feel compelled or pressure at some point to talk about this?
Likely, Lester, simply because that is the way that this has gone through the years now that Hunter Biden has been in the political spotlight. The president is pressed about it. He has consistently, as Peter laid out, said that he believes in his son, that he is proud of his son. This will no doubt intensify the questions for the president as he is on his way to an event, or about to be on his way to an event in Maryland. You look at, and Peter so capably laid out the personal impact of this on the president. There is a political impact too. And in a word, Lester, it is partisan, because we see deep divisions when voters talk about how they see the issue of Hunter Biden's business dealings and undoubtedly this indictment as well. In fact, a new poll out just today from the Associated Press, obviously taken before this indictment dropped suggested that while about half of Americans say they have little or no confidence that the DOJ has handled this investigation well, it is a stark divide among Republicans versus Democrats. 66% of Republicans are concerned about any relationship that Joe Biden may have to what his son has done. Only 7% of Democrats. Those numbers, Lester, are not surprising when you talk with voters, when you talk to Americans about how they see the Hunter Biden issue. It depends on what they watch, what they consume, how politically engaged they are, and what side of the aisle they're on, because we know that there has been so much attention on Hunter Biden from the Republican side of the aisle, specifically in the House of Representatives, underscored very directly, Lester, by the impeachment inquiry that was opened just this week.
All right, Hallie, thanks to Laura Jarrett. Let me ask you about other potential legal exposure. What are we looking at out there?
Well, it's interesting. You know, obviously, as Hallie laid out, a lot of Republicans have been skeptical of David Weiss, the special counsel here. And so I think a lot of people are going to be saying, is this it? Is this all he has? They have sort of been very upset that one of the more serious felonies that he could have potentially been facing, that one already expired on tax charges. Now, there are some that are still available out there. He doesn't have to necessarily bring those, but he does have to bring them again within the statute of limitations
This
period.
doesn't mean he's finished then.
Well, we just don't know. And I think that's the big question. Again, he can file charges anywhere within the entire United States. So he could still file charges in California separate from this indictment. He could always do a superseding indictment with this if he gets new information and the grand jury decides to develop the facts more. We just don't know, I think. But if this is all that there is, you can imagine for some Republicans that have been very skeptical and making a lot of noise about Hunter Biden's business dealings, this will not satisfy them, given how cabined and how narrow the charges are here.
And Danny, how strong or how serious a case is this, and what would you likely expect from a defense?
This is a very serious charge, and it carries serious penalties. And because the elements are really that somebody was a habitual addict of a stimulant or a narcotic, you might expect the defense to be something on the order of, well, that wasn't me. I wasn't that person at that time. And of course, the government will likely introduce evidence, say, from Hunter's book or other evidence that they have that maybe has been reported that, in fact, he was in violation of that statute. But that subsection, the idea that somebody is an addict, really leaves open a lot for definition. So that's why it's a statute, a subsection, I say, that is not very often brought. So it'll be very interesting to see how he defends this case, should he choose to proceed to trial.
All right, Danny, thanks, Laura, as well. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. And tonight on NBC Nightly News, I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching, and good day.